Welcome to The Critique, where we dive into your submitted materials to uncover their potential. Today's submission is this really impassioned script addressing the online harassment directed at a widow named Erica and her children, following the highly public, tragic death of their father, Charlie. Let's just jump right into the feedback because we have a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, let's do it. You know, the raw passion and fierce protective instinct for this grieving family make this a highly compelling piece of advocacy. I mean, the visceral reflex to protect them is so clear.
Oh, absolutely. When you step into a blast radius, your first instinct is to just grab the closest piece of debris and, hurl it at the predators to protect the survivors.
Right, exactly. But we really need to look at how we can refine the focus here to maximize its emotional and moral impact, because sometimes that instinct can get in the way.
Yeah, it definitely can. So where are we starting?
Well, the profound spiritual and moral weight of this material is undeniable, but the reliance on repetitive name-calling risks alienating the audience and undercutting the core message of grace.
Yeah. I noticed that too. There's a lot of really intense language early on.
Yeah, the script repeatedly uses these derogatory nicknames, right? Like Scamdilla and Scamasones and Scantifa. And at one point, it even refers to an online commenter as a psychotic tard.
Yeah, which is pretty jarring.
It really is, and this hostile language directly clashes with the author's explicitly stated Christian values. I mean, they have these calls to pray for everyone involved, even the attacker's children.
Right, and there's that whole scriptural anchor from Matthew 24, right, about the love of many growing cold.
Exactly. It creates this heavy dissonance that just distracts from the actual tragedy of the fatherless children.
So a key theme running through this material seems to be the battle between darkness and light. But I wonder, is it possible the author is using these cartoonish nicknames as a psychological shield?
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Like, when a child calls a monster under the bed a silly name just to make it less terrifying. It feels like a defense mechanism against the genuine horror of the situation.
That's clearly laid out. I wonder, though, if we've considered how elevating the rhetoric will actually make the critique of these attackers far more devastating.
Wait, you think dropping the insults makes it more devastating?
Oh, completely. Because I agree it's a defense mechanism, right? But the suggestion here is to replace those ad hominem attacks with objective, chilling descriptions of the perpetrator's actual behavior. That maintains the author's moral high ground.
Okay, so you're saying that by insulting them, we're kind of letting them off the hook.
Yes, exactly. Because if you call them a name, they can just dismiss you as an angry troll. But, for example, instead of calling that commenter a psychotic tard, you describe the exact jarring reality.
Which is so much darker, honestly.
It is. You say, a supposed Christian, a father of 4, volunteering to do the job of stabbing a grieving widow.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that hits so much harder than any name you could call him.
Right? It forces the reader to just sit with the depravity of the act. And, instead of using Scammers Owens, use her actual name. Or just refer to her as the instigator.
Just completely strip away the playground insult stuff.
Exactly. Frame her actions not as, schoolyard drama, but as a cold, calculated betrayal of human empathy just for internet engagement.
It's funny you mention the empathy thing, because the author actually has this really powerful reflection on their own past later in the...
Yes, I was just thinking about that section.
They write, I was a bad person. That meanness came from a deep-seated anger, and I thought that was just a brilliant moment of vulnerability.
It really is, and the author should lean heavier into that powerful reflection. Draw a mature contrast between their own spiritual growth and the attacker's current darkness.
Like, I used to be like you, but I grew out of it.
Exactly. It highlights how lost these internet trolls are, rather than just calling them names.
Okay, I love that. So we fix the tone, we elevate the rhetoric. But once we do that, we have to talk about how the whole piece is put together, right?
Yeah, we do, because the central thesis regarding the forgotten children is incredibly powerful, yet it is currently buried beneath a lengthy, winding introduction detailing social media posts and conspiracy theories.
Oh my gosh, it takes so long to get to the actual human beings in this story.
It really does. The weakness here is that the script spends the first several minutes quoting ex-posts, discussing Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Peter Thiel, and, Apple software updates.
It was honestly a little disorienting at first. I wasn't sure what the core message was supposed to be.
Right, and it's all happening before finally reaching the profound, heartbreaking reality, which is that 2 babies are going to live the rest of their lives without their father.
By burying the emotional core, You're basically forcing the listener to wade through confusing online drama before they understand why they should even care.
Precisely. They have to do all this work to figure out the state.
Let's look closely at the section discussing the children asking, when is Dad coming back? That shattered.
It's a completely devastating detail.
It really is. Why do you think the writer felt the need to front-load the script with the hybrid robot conspiracy theories instead of starting with that devastating image of the kids?
Building on that point, what if we looked at it from the perspective of the author's own experience? They likely discovered the internet drama first, got angry, and then thought of the kids. So they wrote it in that order.
Oh, right. Like they're just chronicling their own thought process?
Exactly. They wanted to establish the inciting incident. But the suggestion here is to invert the structure entirely. Start with the highest emotional stakes, the family's grief, and introduce the online harassment as a grotesque intrusion into that grief.
Okay, so structurally, how does that actually look on the page?
Well, for a concrete example, you open the piece with the striking, tragic reality. You say, a 31-year-old father who was loved and respected was assassinated in broad daylight, leaving a mother to answer the endless question, when is Dad coming back?
Wow. Yeah, you just dropped the listener right into the absolute deep end of the tragedy.
Yes. And then you pivot to the contrast. You say, while these children are forced to learn about their father through stories, the internet is doing this.
And that's where you drop in the crazy audio clip about hybrids and stabbing.
Exactly. Because now it's not just weird internet drama, it's a direct insult to those grieving kids. And you can use the theme of the deficit the kids will face as the structural spine.
I like that term, the deficit.
Yeah, you just keep returning to it. Every time a new piece of the attacker's behavior is introduced, it continuously reinforces the human cost of all this online vitriol.
So instead of this listing 3 crazy tweets, you list one and then immediately remind the audience, hey, a widow is weeping while these people tweet this garbage.
Right. It keeps the audience emotionally anchored.
Okay, so we've elevated the tone, we've moved the kids to the very first paragraph, but as I kept reading into the second half of the script, things started to feel, I don't know, a bit scattered.
Yeah, I saw that too. The exploration of societal decay contains profound insights, but the inclusion of far-reaching geopolitical and historical tangents diffuses the narrative focus.
Yeah, it really takes a wild turn.
The weakness is that the piece loses its tight, intimate grip on the listener when it diverges into what feels like a 2-part documentary about Theodore Roosevelt's duels.
And the mobsters? The whole thing about the code of ethics for historical street gangs?
Right, and then it suddenly jumps to the hypocrisy of the Free Palestine crowd regarding babies in Gaza. It's just a lot to take in.
But wait, let me touch back on this for a sec. I can see what you're going for here with the mobster analogy, right? Like the idea that even outlaws had a line they wouldn't cross.
Sure, the contrast is definitely interesting.
But the detailed explanation of infidelity and gang cult, it feels like we walked into a completely different essay. Does the writer even need these external examples when the primary story is already so strong?
Is there a risk that focusing solely on these global comparisons dilutes the main point? I completely agree with you. The listener is being forced to do way too much mental gymnastics.
Yeah, it's pulling them away from the visceral tragedy of Erica and Charlie's family.
Exactly. So the suggestion is to streamline or entirely cut the external analogies. The author already has a brilliant scriptural anchor with Matthew 24, because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold.
That quote is so powerful on its own, it really doesn't need all the extra dressing.
It really doesn't. So for concrete examples, I would say cut the Theodore Roosevelt duel and the Gaza and Israel comparisons entirely. They just carry heavy, distracting baggage that derails the pacing.
Yeah, the Gaza mention especially felt like it was going to start a completely different political debate in the listener's head.
Right, you don't want your audience arguing with you about foreign policy when they should be mourning these children.
So what if they really want to keep the mobster thing? Because I do think the outlaw code concept is kind of punchy.
If it has to be kept, reduce it to a single, sharp sentence. Just say, even street gangs and mobsters historically had a code. You don't touch the widows and children. Today that love has grown cold.
Boom! Move right back to the family. I love that.
Exactly. And instead of looking globally, expand on the profound observation the author makes about the conservative platform.
Oh, yes, the betrayal from inside the house.
Yes. Emphasize that the deepest betrayal is that Charlie's own political peers, the village that should be helping raise these babies, are the ones whose love has grown cold.
That is incredibly poignant. It makes the tragedy intimately focused rather than globally scattered. It's so much more painful when it's your own community failing you.
It really is. And keeping the focus right there maintains that laser-sharp emotional intensity from start to finish.
Well, this has been an incredibly productive breakdown. So just to recap the actionable steps for the writer here. First, we need to elevate the tone, right? Replace those ad hominem insults with objective, factual descriptions of the attacker's cruelty. Let their actions speak for themselves.
Exactly. And second, invert the structure. Open with the heartbreak of the fatherless children rather than burying it under all the internet drama. Anchor the audience in the real stakes immediately.
And finally, cut the historical and geopolitical tangents. Lose the Teddy Roosevelt and the foreign policy debates, and maintain a laser focus on the family's intimate tragedy and that central theme of love growing cold.
It's a fantastic piece of writing. It just needs that structural tightening to really hit home.
It absolutely does. We want to extend a warm invitation to the listener to apply these edits and submit their revised work back to the critique for further exploration. We would love to see where this goes next. Thanks for listening.